David de Grutula, or better known to gamers as David Cage, is a French video game developer and founder of the game development studio called Quantic Dream. He has also been both the writer and the director of many of the studio's titles, and is probably best known for such games as Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. The reason why I bring up Mr. Cage in this video is his visions and design principles in the video games that he has been deeply involved with. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is Callistophilus, and this is the story of Detroit Become Human. Early 2019, the game development studio Quantic Dream announces that their flagship story-driven bestseller video games will no longer be PlayStation exclusives, and they are actively being developed for the PC platform with visual upgrades and first-class control support for keyboard and mouse. Heavy Rain is to be launched on the 24th of June, Beyond Two Souls on the 22nd of July, and Detroit Become Human sometime later in the fall. At the time of the writing, all three titles have been released, and the quality of the releases has been tolerable. In order to elaborate on the overall quality of the experiences, we need to explain a bit where I'm coming from with this. To begin with, all three games have the exact same pros and cons for me. They look great, the animation work is stellar, the voice acting is amazing. The stories are probably some of the very best in any form of interactive media that I have ever seen. The immersion is top notch if everything works as expected. But then there are the limitations. The FPS is limited to either 30 or 60 frames per second. When unlocking the FPS, some of the animations are prone to go haywire. But okay, given the story-driven nature of these video games, running the games over 60 FPS does not really make a whole lot of difference anyway. There is a small drop in the overall smoothness, but nothing like going from 60 to 30 FPS. But what is a real shame with these games is their lack of 21:9 aspect ratio support, which is most notable in Heavy Rain, where the non-playable characters are unloaded the moment they step out of a 16:9 viewport. For all three games, there are patches and workarounds available to get them running at 21:9 resolutions, but none work flawlessly due to the way that the games have been programmed. The issue is amplified even further due to Quantic Dream promising full 21:9 support for all the aforementioned games. But as the games were released and people found out that there really was no real horizontal plus ultra-wide support, the team went on full radio silent and did not reply to any of the queries made on social media, Reddit, nor even through their official support ticketing system. I would also like to take a moment here to acknowledge a wonderful PC gaming community member who goes by the name of Rose. Rose has been responsible for an unreal amount of patches and workarounds to help fellow ultra-wide monitor users get a ton of games running properly with their overly wide native monitor resolutions, and is doing all this from spare time, without any real payment. Rose also has a Ko-fi account where donations can be made to support the cause, and I strongly urge you to go and buy Rose a Ko-fi if you are running an ultra-wide monitor or a similar setup. If you have visited PC Gaming Wiki and received a patch or a tool to get a game working properly with an ultra-wide resolution, there is a really high probability that you have used something that Rose has come up with. The support link will be in the video description, but now back to the topic of the video. If we were to speak of the gameplay mechanics of Detroit Become Human, Heavy Rain, or Beyond Two Souls, we could easily summarize the mechanics up into three main categories or phases. Firstly, there is the exploration phase, where you essentially just guide your character around, just like in a walking simulator, and interact with various in-game objects, whilst gathering information regarding something. Then there is the conversation phase, where you need to make time-based conversation decisions which will affect other characters' affinity towards your playable character, and also the outcome of both various situations in the game and also the ending. The time constraints set on you for having to come up with a reply in some of these situations is both a curse and a blessing to the overall experience, as if it works as expected, then the situations can feel tense and very rewarding, but if it doesn't, then it sometimes can feel like a big letdown. During my playthrough of all the three games, I noticed that there were multiple occasions where I asked myself the question, why on earth did he just say that? That is because the option for replying in a conversation are simply keywords and you have no idea what the character is about to say when selecting a specific reply. As said, when it works, it's great, but when it doesn't, then it can feel like a bad design choice. Generally speaking though, think of this as you're more like guiding the character to say something, but not putting the words into his or her mouth directly. And lastly, there is the dreaded QuickTime events phase, or QTE for short. There are a ton of those in all of the games, and you will really feel the pressure in those moments. Some might say that QTEs should be banned from all the video game industry forever, but in these games, they really just work. The negative side of them is that most of the time you're doing these sections, you cannot really focus on what is actually happening on the screen, but are rather just blindly waiting for the next QTE prompt to come up, and that takes down the immersion a bit. But I really think that without these sections, the games would not be as great as they are. Call me mad, but hear me out. These are story-driven games, which would otherwise lack the physical gameplay stress of trying to beat the game. The tense action moments need to feel tense, and the only real way to convey that to the player is to involve them somehow into the action and make them responsible for overcoming an obstacle. Sure, if they are really not your cup of tea and you wish to get rid of them, then you can always play the games at the easier difficulty mode, which take out a lot of the QTE action and does not require you to have great timing, but you would also lose out on some of that immersion that way. With all that being said, this is it. These 3 stages of gameplay mechanics are pretty much all that you're going to get from these games, with slight variations and few gimmicky mechanics thrown into the mix for a good measure from time to time, which are probably only used for 2 or 3 times per game. So what is the point of even playing these games in the end, you might ask, if the gameplay mechanics are simply so primitive? The answer is the story, writing and presentation, in all of which you can sense Mr. Cage's handwriting. Even though we have talked about Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls up to this point as well, let us focus more on Detroit Become Human from now on. Every mentioned David Cage game has had an intriguing story with tons of twists and heavy decisions to be made, and Detroit Become Human is no exception. You are painted a near-futuristic world where humanity has developed androids to help and serve pretty much any need imaginable. There are androids for keeping your house clean, androids designed to replace warehouse workers, androids for different outdoor maintenance works, and even androids to replace your life partners who are designed to bring your dirtiest pleasures to reality. If we can currently say that there's an app for that, regarding pretty much anything, then in Detroit Become Human, you could replace that with there is an android for that. Having developed such highly conscious androids though does come at a cost. A lot of people have lost their jobs and families due to androids simply replacing them, so not everyone is happy about this advancement in technology. Moreover, some of the androids have also become self-aware, deviants as they are referred to, free of their programmed boundaries, mostly due to being mistreated by humans. And this is where the real story of Detroit Become Human begins. The story follows 3 main characters. Kara, a housewife android sold to a family of an abusive single father Todd and his daughter Alice. Connor, a specially designed prototype android by CyberLife to help solve android-related crime cases. And Marcus, an android who takes care of an old and wealthy painter Carl in his mansion. In a true David Cage style, all these 3 stories intertwine in one point or another during the main storyline, and it is truly masterfully written. But that is not the reason what makes this story so great. What makes it truly great is the way that the world is presented to you, the decisions you have to make, and the different perspectives into human nature that you are forced to see and acknowledge. Let me put it like this. The way that the story is presented and the things that you are subjected to makes you really think about humanity, the way that we act and the way that we react to various people and situations. There is no black and white in real life, and this is also depicted very clearly in the game. You might think that you're doing the right thing until you try to empathize with people on the opposite end of the spectrum or in the middle of it. This is what makes these games pretty much masterpieces in my mind. Now I shall try to refrain myself from spoiling the entire story of Detroit Become Human for the ones who have not yet had the pleasure of playing it, but I will bring out some of the really memorable moments for me from the game now, and there will be spoilers here for sure. Also, if you have not played the game yet, please do yourself a favor and go play it. It is really that good. Or you can watch a full playthrough of it on YouTube, but that would really decrease the value you get from it, and you would kind of miss out the whole point of this video. Let us start with Connor, the prototype android especially designed to help the Detroit Police Department investigate and solve deviant-related crime cases. The very first mission puts Connor on top of an apartment building, where an android has become deviant due to the emotional stress of raw fear of being shut down and thrown away by the family, as they had plans to replace him with a newer model. Having killed the father and now holds the family daughter in hostage on top of the building, threatening to kill them both. Connor has been sent to investigate and defuse the situation. This whole mission essentially acts as a tutorial, where the gameplay mechanics are introduced to the player and you don't really feel a strong bond with the protagonist yet. What this mission does bring to the table, however, is the sense of urgency. You really do not have all day to investigate the apartment for possible clues why this has happened, and what the information could be used against the android in order to calmly defuse the situation. As with every passing moment, the deviant becomes more and more agitated, and the situation grows ever more critical. This is something that Detroit Become Human does really well at times. It puts you in stressful situations where you must find the right clues and answers to your problems or face the consequences. There are a ton of games which try to mimic this, but almost never do they actually do anything drastic if you just linger around for too long. In my playthrough, I tried to defuse the situation as best I could, but Connor still had to sacrifice himself in order to save the child. As said, at this point there is no real bond built with the androids yet, and you tend to see this as a normal win for humanity. An android killing off an android, no big deal, right? As long as the human survives, it is perfectly acceptable. Right? Well, not for long. This is the main question that Detroit Become Human tackles, and it tackles it darn well. What if our own creation becomes sentient and has the ability to feel emotions? Will we still treat them as objects? Is it fair to treat them as objects? As slaves? As more cases of androids becoming deviant emerge, Connor is rebuilt by CyberLife organization and sent to assist the Detroit Police Department once again. With what feels like a cliché, he teams up with Hank, an old-school police detective who has had his fair share of hard times. And after losing his son in an emergency operation after a near-fatal car accident, he blames androids for his suffering, as due to ill circumstances, it was an android who had to operate on his son after the accident, and well, he didn't make it. The unlikely team goes from case to case discovering clues about deviants and the mysterious RA9, which according to the deviants is supposed to save them, bring an end to their slavery and provide equality to the androids with the human race. Now it is never explicitly explained what the RA9 is or who it is, but from what I can gather, it is something that all the deviants seem to believe in, like a higher power, an equivalent of a god in our terms, I guess. Now, throughout Connor's sections of the game, it is amazing how the dynamic between Hank and Connor is portrayed. In my playthrough, we started out as pretty much two stubborn individuals having to work for a common goal, but hating each other's guts whilst doing it. But throughout the journey, we managed to achieve what could be considered as true friendship or partnership, for the lack of a better term. Saying this in a video does not really emphasize the meaninglessness of it enough, but maybe the following clip could provide some better insight to what I mean. At one point, the defective duo is chasing another deviant who could provide vital information about the deviants and the RA9, and our chase takes us to the rooftops. Hank manages to almost get the android, but is thrown off balance and over the guardrails of the building. With him hanging to his life and the deviant starting to take off, we have a choice to make. Whether we go after the deviant or help Hank. It would be an easy pick if we did not see that the chances of Hank's survival in this situation are actually very good and he will probably be just fine. So based on this, we could leave him be and know that he would be okay and go after the android. But that would make Hank pretty much hate us even more. Or then do we help Hank and risk the deviant getting away? Remember that these choices are timed and you are not supposed to harass the system by watching walkthroughs beforehand or quitting out of the game before a save point. These moments are stressful as all hell, and I love them for that. In any case, helping Hank there is kind of the pivot point, where we can really start getting on better terms with him, but it also leaves us with the what if moments. What if we had not chosen the actions that we did? I'm saying this now that this game begs for multiple playthroughs or watching alternative playthroughs online. Next, let's talk about Kara and her journey through Detroit, because that is exactly what it is, a journey. And it starts off at a local Android dealership where Kara's owner is due to pick her up after she had undergone a complete rebuild. Soon enough though, we will find out why the rebuild was even necessary in the first place as she settles down in her new home. The owner Todd is a guy who has fallen between life's merciless cogwheels and has lost his job. The house is a mess, and it doesn't help that there are multiple unpaid bills piling up. So it is safe to say that there is a lot of stress put on top of Todd's shoulders, though how he expresses his feelings is what sets the whole story's set of events into motion. You see, Todd likes to find comfort in drugs and alcohol. This does not really fit the picture when you also have a young daughter living right there with you, and soon enough we start to see that he can get rather abusive with the ones closest to him. The moment Kara becomes a deviant is when the sheer will of keeping innocent Alice safe from his crazed father overcomes the obedience which has been programmed into her, and the short sequence of events, which should end with Kara escaping Todd with Alice, is presented in a very stressful and meaningful way. During my playthrough, Todd was killed in the end and Kara managed to get away with Alice. This is where Kara's and Alice's journey really begins, looking for a safe place, somewhere where they could be a family without harassment, without fear of being beaten to a pulp for nothing that they did wrong. Kara's and Alice's journey is all about the feeling of having a family. They start on the streets, looking for a shelter to spend a night at, not having a dime to spare, and every dangerous encounter that they have with the humans or other androids threatens to split them apart. It really does not help that there is now also police looking for them. Probably one of the most memorable sections of Kara's journey is when they get trapped inside a manor run by a man called Zlatko and his huge warehouse android Luther. In order to run experiments on Kara, she is fooled into a trap which she barely manages to escape from. As the two are trying to make their escape, they eventually end up being held up by Zlatko with his shotgun at near point-blank range. This is, however, when his assistant Luther finally becomes deviant to turn the tides against Zlatko and help Kara and Alice make their escape. The reason behind Luther's breakthrough is the bond that Kara and Alice share and have shown. This moment is glorious. After that, he decides to help Kara and Alice reach Canada, the promised land for androids where there are no active regulations in place which would affect androids and put them below humans in the food chain. A place where an android family could live freely without the fear of being subjected to oppression and abuse. Throughout the rest of Kara's journey, Luther becomes more and more of a father figure in their strange family, and that is really the point of the whole journey, being a family. Having family values, valuing those closest to you and putting your faith in them. Being able to count on your family even through the hardest of times. If you manage to complete Detroit Become Human with them all three still together, then the final moments of the game will feel really rewarding. Or at least, that's what it felt like to me. So, if Connor's storyline was all about building an unlikely friendship, and Kara's was about the family, then that leaves us with Marcus. In my opinion, Marcus's story is about suffering and hope. His story begins in a wealthy manor where he serves his master Carl, who also happens to be a really successful painter, yet who is also getting pretty old and tired of the world around him. He's also pretty invested in Marcus and believes that the androids are capable of far more than what humans ever could. He tries to push Marcus to give him more abstract mind and free will to a point that it feels like he considers Marcus to be his son, or at least an heir to his fortunes. Yet Carl actually has a human son as well, called Leo, who comes off as a spoiled brat who only comes to see his dad whenever he runs out of money. Marcus's story really begins one night when they return home with Carl after a formal party, only to find Leo stealing Carl's artwork in order to sell it off for a quick buck. The two get off to a bad argument and Carl's heart fails on him, putting Marcus in a really weird spot. As Leo never liked Marcus, he blames him for his father's death and Marcus gets shut down by the government. Almost, but not completely. Barely managing the boot, Marcus wakes up in an android scrapyard, scavenging for parts to get him going again. As he has no master now, he is a deviant by default, looking for a purpose. He hears that there is a place for androids, a safe haven of sorts, called Jericho, and he goes on a quest to search it out, only to find out that it is just an old shipwreck, where some broken androids have gathered. This is not the life that Carl would have wanted him to live, and so he sets on another quest to help the androids in Detroit. Wake them, make them have free will, have them become deviants, and help them fight for equality amongst humans and androids. On this journey, you will help the ones in need, steal from the rich and give to the poor, run protest campaigns for android rights, and eventually try to fight for the freedom and equality between androids and humans in Detroit. This is the strangest of all the three stories, as I felt really attached to Marcus from the start, but the real content of what series events play out, they are really not that emotional in comparison to the other stories in my mind. But still, I really cared about Marcus's fate, and I guess the sense of justice really kept me invested in the story. Every time I felt like the story was going to be a bit on the boring side, talking from the emotional aspect here, every time the game threw in something which made me feel like that there is just some serious injustice being done to the androids in Detroit. So I guess besides suffering and hope, this story is really about the whole feeling of justice as well. So by now, we have covered the general outlines of all three different stories that Mr. Cage has written for us in Detroit Become Human. And as said earlier, all three stories intertwine with each other in a pretty spectacular way. The game itself is meant to be enjoyed in a way that you take responsibility for your actions, and those actions are often to be performed in very stressful situations. There is a way to harass the gameplay though, and even I am not 100% clean of this sin. If you make a bad decision at any point and are really determined that this was indeed the wrong choice for your story, you can exit out to the main menu before the game reaches another checkpoint, and then simply resume from the last. This demolishes some of the immersion and the short-term responsibility part of your actions, and thus is not recommended, but it is an option for you. Also, you can restart any of the main sections of the current playthrough with the choices from earlier chapters intact, so there is also that. So all in all, Detroit Become Human is an amazing game if you are into story-based adventure games and like the ones that came before it. The games such as Beyond Two Souls, Heavy Rain and Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. These games are definitely not for everyone, as most of the action of the game consists of simply walking around and doing quicktime events. But for those looking for a great story with light gaming thrown into the mix, it is a real treat. I hope that you liked the video. I know that it has been way longer than what I usually have done before, but with this game I just felt like talking about it. I hope the new year is treating you guys well so far, and hopefully the best is yet to come. Have a happy new year everyone, and all the best to you guys. Bye bye.
Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be alright.